Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench. Hello there, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to let you know that you can now join our supporting cast over on Patreon. As thanks for your support, you'll be able to help us pick films, submit questions for guests, have first pick on brand new and exclusive merch, and much more. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show. Hello and welcome back to Fighting on Film. This week we have a film chosen by our wonderful supporting cast over on Patreon. We're going to be looking at 1988's The Beast, a film that gives the sort of Russian perspective of the war in Afghanistan, the Russian war in Afghanistan. It's a really interesting film, and I'm so glad that the patrons picked this one. And if you guys want to get involved, support the show, and also each month pick a film for us to take a look at, then heading over to Patreon and taking a look at the perks we have over there is a great way to do it.
Yeah, and this one's been a long time coming. I know we've had a lot of emails on our search, the request feature on our website. We've had this one come up a lot, and we knew that it would be one that would be quite well received. We've got this big, part of war films, and we stick them into like a generator, don't we? Like a little wheel thing, and we just click a button and let it choose 4 random films. It's the fairest way. And when this came out of the hat, we were like, "Oh, The Beast, nice."
Sometimes you know what's going to win. Like the 4 that come out, you just have a feeling. I mean, sometimes we theme them. Sometimes we have a little theme, and we pick a couple that we have been meaning to do. Probably need to do some chivalry and swords soon.
We do.
Had another comment about us not having done any chivalry and swords the other day, and I was like, hands up, you're completely on the money. We have been remiss, but we haven't forgotten.
Well, we were going to do Ironclad, and then it didn't get picked because we were really looking forward to doing it. And then it didn't get picked on the Patreon pick, and we were like, "Oh no!" We thought it'd be like, "Here you are. Here's what you asked for. We warned you. We don't know anything about medieval times. We warned you. It'd be worth it just to riff off of Paul Giamatti going, "England is mine."
Oh my god, iconic! That scene is amazing.
It's
he
great.
Goes all in. Anyway, that's not the film we're covering.
That's the future. Yeah, that's future FOF. Come on.
It is. I'll kick off with production, then you can jump in with cast, Rob.
Without a doubt. Why not?
Directed by Kevin Reynolds, perhaps best known as the writer of 1984's Red Dawn, which has some real links with this film, obviously in subject matter. Director of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, that childhood classic that is on every Christmas in the 90s. Waterworld.
It's true. Everything I do,
I do it for you. Director of The Count of Monte Cristo in 2002, which I thought was quite a good adaptation with Guy Pearce.
Didn't see it.
Pretty good. Produced by Gil Friesen. The film was edited by Peter Boyle, who worked on those 1970s Musketeers films, which I always loved as a kid. Also worked on Waterworld and Robin Hood. There's a kind of a link coming in here, isn't there? There's some Waterworld, Robin Hood links, definitely. Cinematography was by Douglas Milsom, who had an incredible career, starting out with working as a camera op on The Guns of Navarone. Barry Lyndon, worked on The Last of the Mohicans, and he did the cinematography for Full Metal Jacket. And, of course, that seminal film from Jean-Claude Van Damme, The Legionnaire.
That small Kubrick movie, yeah.
No, to be fair, though, we need to do both Full Metal Jacket and Legionnaire.
Of course we do. But it's just, I'm going to talk about it later on, because it forms the crux of my final thoughts. But gosh, his cinematography just elevates this movie. Oh, it's gorgeous
that opening sequence pans across the dogs, the wild dogs.
Oh, it's so nice.
It's gorgeous, and the sun.
Everything is just beautiful. Yeah.
The film is based on a play, Nanawatai, written by William Mastrosimone, which comes from Pashto, and it means, I think it means mercy. And it's essentially, it's explained in the film what this means. Obviously, when the screenplay was developed, they went with a more attention-grabbing name. Initially, it was going to be released as The Beast of War, which in some markets it was released as The Beast of War. But in others, it was released solely as The Beast. And apparently, Mastrosimone traveled to Afghanistan in 1981 and spent a week, 8 days with the Mujahideen after seeing a documentary about the war in Afghanistan in 1980. So he traveled over there, spent a week with them, and then spent another couple of months in Pakistan putting the play together. And the play had its debut in LA in 1985, which I think was around the time it was optioned as a screenplay. And it just got picked up. The film was filmed in Israel, which we'll talk about more when we come to the alley tally, because there's a lot to talk about right there.
On. Yeah.
And it took about 10 weeks to film. It wasn't a massive box office success. The figures that are online say it made under $200,000, which obviously from just box office receipts, that's not great considering the film had a budget of around $8 million. But it's definitely since then become one of those cult classics. So it may have made a lot of that back on VHS rentals, DVD sales, etc., etc., etc. But no figures for that. I will say it now, I really enjoyed it. I don't know how it buried at the box office.
I can understand why it's a cult classic, but I think it's one of those very annoying films where you're like, oh, just a few changes. Perhaps, I don't know where, but a few changes somewhere, and this could have been a smash. This really could have cleaned up.
Maybe if they'd had a big name attached to it.
I kind of feel that in a way, but then I don't really feel that because I think everyone does a great job.
I agree.
It's something going on somewhere. Like it feels like maybe it wasn't marketed properly, or I don't know, perhaps sensitivity about the war that was going on already. I don't know, because it comes out in a weird time because, the war in Afghanistan is winding down in 88. It's not going very well for the Russians. It hasn't been for a long time. Like, the regime at home's crumbling. Perhaps they could have maybe made more of that, or maybe they thought it might hurt them. Maybe I don't know. It's a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah. I couldn't see any reason behind that, but
no, me neither. But it's proper cult. And before we move on, you can get this on DVD if you can find it online. I got mine in a charity shop. I was quite lucky. I snatched this up the minute I saw it. I saw it,
and we watched it together.
We did, yeah. This is one of the first times I think me and Matt have watched a film for the pod together, which was quite cool.
In the same room, that is, anyway.
Same room, yeah. Not over
we watched things online together, but we've never actually been in the same room.
Third-party viewing app thing we've got that doesn't quite work.
trying to sync up exactly where we are in the film is a nightmare. One thing I will say before we do cast is, obviously it came out in the exact same year as Rambo 3, which is a much more bombastic, larger profile movie about the Russian war in Afghanistan, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. So perhaps, I don't know, perhaps it got lost within the Rambo 3.
Yeah, maybe. That's the point. Or maybe people thought, I've seen Rambo 3. I know what's going on in Afghanistan. I don't need to watch this film.
Or maybe the studio thought, well, there's no point us pushing this, or which is, that doesn't make a great deal of sense either, because often studios will push a similar film.
But just before we move on to cast, you can rent this one on YouTube, Google Play, Amazon Prime, and there's a very expensive Blu-ray, unattainable, I think like £100 or something online. Stupid money.
I bet it'd be worth it, I bet the cinematography would be
the clips
crispy.
People have clipped from YouTube and put on of the HD rip look fantastic. So I would have loved to see this in HD. But anyway,
I'd like to see it in a cinema. That'd be amazing.
Amazing. I mean, it's what the cinematography would be made for. But yeah, please go and get it. Please watch it if you can. But anyway, cast this week. We have George Dzundza as Commander Tank Boy Daskal, and he's a German-born American film and TV actor. His family emigrated to New York in the 50s after the Second World War. One of his earliest film roles was playing John Welsh in 1978's The Deer Hunter. In 1984, he appeared in the Dudley Moore Eddie Murphy military comedy Best Defense, which is in the sort of vein of Pentagon Wars. It's about a tank designer.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, they threw Eddie Murphy.
What an interesting combination.
Yeah, it's a Dudley Moore film, and then apparently it scanned badly with audiences, and then they cut in Eddie Murphy as like a parallel storyline, and he doesn't meet any of the cast. It sounds insane. We need to watch it. We need to review it.
That sounds like a fever dream. Wow.
And he also starred alongside Denzel Washington and George Hackman and George Hackman. Jesus,
George Hackman.
George Hackman. Yeah.
Famously wore fedoras in his films. Not yeah, hats. The Belgian Connection. Amazing film.
And he starred alongside Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman in 1995's The Crimson Tide. Other credits include playing Sergeant Max Greenlee in the first season of Law & Order, and he had voice work on Animaniacs, Batman the Animated Series, and he also voiced Sergeant Platt in 2004's Shell Shock Vietnam 67 for the PlayStation 2.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Which is one of my all-time favourite games from that era. And I thought, I know that voice. Yeah. And it was only when we watched The Beast that I had to look it up after. I was like, he's in Shell Shock. Amazing little connection there. Linking my past to my present. Amazing. So then we have Jason Patric as Konstantin Korvachenko, and he rose to prominence playing the lead in the 1987 horror The Lost Boys. So he's fresh off like breakthrough stardom coming on this film. Other roles include Lieutenant Gatewood in 1993's Geronimo, an American Legend. I know you like that film, Matt.
Good film, yeah. We covered it in a show and tell a while back.
In 2004, he played Colonel Jim Bowie in The Alamo, the Disney one that flopped. If you want to go and listen to someone who worked on that movie,
I like that version.
It's good, yeah.
It's a good film.
Charles Maines, we did an interview with the sound designer of that film. Go back and listen to that. That's a really good chat. Jason Patric himself is also on the list of actors who recorded scenes for The Thin Red Line, but were cut from the final edit. And the list of people who were cut from that movie is insane. I've just got a small little section from it. So not only did Jason Patric get cut, Adrian Brody got cut, Gary Oldman got cut, George Clooney got cut as well. And that's not even all of them.
Wow.
Amazing. Then we have Stephen Bauer as Khan Taj. He's like a Mujahideen fighter. And he's a Cuban-born American actor who is probably most famous for playing Manny, Al Pacino's sidekick in Scarface. If you know, you know. In terms of war films, though, he appeared in the Behind Enemy Lines threequel, Behind Enemy Lines Colombia, as General Valles, which sounds
Behind Enemy Lines month is going to be lit.
I know, right? Yeah. No, stop threatening all these bizarre months. You're going to damage the metric. How dare you? Other roles include playing the drug lord Fuente in Breaking Bad, and then he reprised a role in Better Call Saul, and he's also been on like tons of American TVs, CSI, Hawaii Five-0, Cold Case, Law and Order. Really prolific. Then we have Eric Avery as Samad. He's the tank crew's Afghan interpreter.
I love him in this.
He's really good in it. Really good. An Indian-born actor who's worked extensively on American TV and film projects. His role in The Beast is one of his earliest roles. His credits include the 90s remake of McKell's Navy. He's in The Mummy, Planet of the Apes, Daredevil. TV and stage work is extensive. I could go on for hours. It's so much. And he also, another video game connection, he voiced Master Rahul in the Destiny video game franchise, which is a nice little thing. Yeah. Then on to Stephen Baldwin as Anatoly Golikov. And he's one of the Baldwin brothers. Made his film debut in The Beast. It's his first big project. Uncredited in Casualties of War in 1989. He also appeared on the 4th of July in the same year. And he also appeared in The Usual Suspects in 1995. And he played Barney Rubble in Viva Rock Vegas in 2000.
Holy shit, he did. Wow.
I say awful, but I enjoyed it when I was little. Because it's weird.
I don't know.
Back to back, everyone changes because no one came back from the first film. Oh, it's so funny. I watched it when I was little and I was like, that's not John Goodman.
Who played? Oh, yeah.
Rick Moranis and John Goodman. And then it's Mark Addy and Stephen Baldwin.
Oh, my God, it is, yeah. Oh, God. Anyway, moving on from that bombshell.
And then rounding out the tank crew, we have Donald Patrick Harvey as Kaminsky. And The Beast is his 5th credit. So a lot of these actors are quite young, apart from George Zander. When they're coming into this, he played Corporal Clark in Casualties of War in 1989. So there's a connection between him and Baldwin. He was a mercenary in Men in War, the Dolph Lundgren film from 1994. He appeared in the 1995 Tank Girl adaptation, and he was Sergeant Becker in The Thin Red Line. So he didn't get cut, but Jason Patric did. A bit mean. And on TV, he's just had so many small roles in American film and TV. It's another list you could go on, but Miami Vice, NYPD Blue, Yellowstone, Pam and Tommy. He's been in a lot. And then we have Shoshi Marciano as Shirina. She's the main Afghan woman who has her sort of band of rebels who are all women.
Yeah, her fiance is killed in the village sequence, isn't he?
Yeah,
and she wants revenge.
Yeah, and they bring their jihad, but in a completely different way. It's quite nice. There's a parallel. They're all doing the same thing, but they're all sort of on parallel lines. It's a good. It's almost like a road movie at times because they all have their own journey. It's interesting. But she only has a small credit list. I couldn't find much about her online, but she's been in mainly Israeli productions, including 1984's The Little Drummer Girl, Iran Days of Crisis, and she had one appearance in an episode of the early 90s detective drama Tropical Heat, which sounded quite good. I'd never heard of it. And then we have Dale Dye as an uncredited role as a Russian helicopter door gunner, and he was also the film's military advisor.
He was indeed.
He is, yeah. And he said about this, working on the film on the Warriors Inc. website, I was also less than impressed by the tanks I'd seen in earlier films. They were too clean, obviously carefully and lovingly protected specimens from someone's collection of war relics. That's not the way the tank looks in combat, as any veteran will tell you, and I was determined that our tanks would not look like museum relics. They had the right look, and I believe the crews performed extremely well on camera.
Yeah, apparently he negotiated the purchase of them with the IDF.
It's incredible, isn't it? I could read. I wish Dale does a book, a Warriors Inc. like magnum opus book.
Yeah, Dale needs to do a book, that's for sure. I mean, so influential.
Yeah, any listener of the show, just go on the Warriors Inc. website and click the projects worked on section and just have a read, because there's so many great anecdotes from on set. It's amazing, really is. And then we have a retro review. Moving on, it comes from the LA Times from Michael Wilmington, September 16th, 1988. And I'll read you his conclusion. He says, The Beast is no anti-war movie, but it isn't a jingoistic bloodbath either. It's a battle movie in some ways to war stupidity. It's a battle movie alert in some ways to war stupidity, to the cycle of waste and futility it represents, the destructive happenstance and fumbling bloodiness it usually generates, and the howls of the beast it kills or dies.
I would say it's an anti-war movie, wouldn't you?
I think it is. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a propaganda piece, that's for sure.
It's a mixture. It's an odd mixture of propaganda. It's like on the button culturally at the time, and it's anti-war, but then it's pro-Mujahideen. But then I think 10 years later, it wouldn't. It's very time capsule.
Much it's like Rambo 3
is. Yeah. It's not Ninth Company. It isn't that level of propaganda, because that is oh my God, that's Russian state propaganda, basically Ninth Company. Yeah. Although it's a very good film, piece of cinema, it's good, but its overarching message is we were correct to do what we did in Afghanistan, whereas this movie is pretty much no. Unequivocally no.
We need to cover it, because I have not seen that film in quite a long time.
It's a little bit.
I can't remember the details of it.
It's Russian Full Metal Jacket with a big battle at the end. I think that's the best way to describe it, because you follow the chaps from there getting their conscription to being in Afghanistan. It's a very big journey of a movie.
I can't wait for the version of that from Ukraine.
Oh, I know, right? That's gonna be fun. Yeah, we'll get them.
Yeah,
we'll get them.
No doubt.
But it's an interesting film. So I think maybe we should get your opinion, because every week we ask for your one-word reviews, and we love to get them. If you're on the Twitter, they go up every Monday or Sunday before we record. And
at Fighting on Film.
at Fighting on Film on Twitter. Yeah, please do follow us. And we had another bumper response. There was 140 odd likes, 53 replies. We love it when you guys get involved. It means a lot to us. So Tom Petch, who we talked to last week, he says, sweaty. Battle design goes with superb film. Inkikuchi from the Imperial War Museum goes with RPG Kaboom Tank. 3 words, but he did join them with dots, so I'll take it. Probably the nearest 1980s Afghanistan war film can get to bring up the pit. Lance Nielsen says excellent. Andy Moody goes with Enfield. Kevin Getz says anti-Rambo. And Harry Webb goes with great film. Positive reactions this week, and a few people, admittedly, who hadn't seen it. And I can completely understand, because it's cult and it's rare, and I don't think it's on TV very often. So I can fully understand if you haven't seen it.
I can't remember last time I saw it on UK listings anyway.
This feels like it would have been on Movie Drone back in the day, or it would have been like Saturday night.
Movies for Men movie.
Yeah, movies for men.
The Great Movies channels over here need to get it.
They do, man. Yeah, I'm sure it's cheap. I'm sure it's cheap to license. Maybe we should license it. Maybe we should create a
we need a TV
streaming
channel. Maybe that's it.
Because there's too many streaming services anyway. So a fairly decent.
We might as well throw another one in the hat.
Independent war movie show should have one. I'll bankrupt my family by buying licenses to war movie properties. Why not?
My family can't eat. Why? Because I keep buying the licenses to obscure war movies. Please, somebody help me. I can't balance the books.
I've mortgaged the house trying to buy the rights to 9 Men. Help me. I need help.
There's a Bill Nye British film to be made of us trying to get the rights to 9 Men.
And I just go insane and start fashioning clothes out of old lobby cards. So maybe we should, after all that hilarity, we should move on to the alley tally.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
What's your pick this week, Rob?
Well, there's a hell of a lot in there. I just like seeing the Mujahideen on camera, like in anything. They just fascinate me as a force, historically. Obviously they were a rebellion, they were an insurgency force, and they had, a wild amount of kit given to them throughout the 80s and late 70s. So in this, they run around with AKs that they've sort of personalized with beads and then bits of like weaving like the stock and things like that. A very Afghan thing to do, and it was impressive that they included it in this. It was nice. Good mise en scène. Nick, your word there.
Excellent mise en scène.
SMLEs as well, with bandoliers and single rounds and no stripper clips. I love that. In the 80s, obviously, as I said, they were supplied by a lot of people and a lot of different equipment, but the MI6 actually supplied the Mujahideen with short magazine Enfield that they bought, and then they bought ammunition from Indian stores and their own stores. Why did we get a film like that? There's Charlie Wilson's War, but surely there's got to be like a one-shot drama about an MI6 agent like trying to buy up all of SMLEs in India.
Like handing out SMLEs and blowpipes.
Blowpipe missiles. Yeah, incredible. But no, and again, they've got recoilless rifles that are clearly sort of supplied by the CIA, things like that. There's no stingers in this, but they have RPGs. They look really good. As I say, the costume department's spot on. I had no idea that it was Manny out of Scarface until I looked at the credits, because he looks good.
Got those aviators on, hasn't he? So
looks great. Yeah, I know that's another chap. That's their sort of.
Oh, it's the other chap, the chap that talks to Jason Patric, isn't it? Yeah,
that's it.
That's right.
Yeah. But
although the leader of the actual like group of Mujahideen that arrived at the village after the attack, their drip is insane.
Oh, immaculate! They're looking great.
Fatigues, packholes, aviators.
Yeah, even down to like not captured, but even down to like little like 2-liter motorbikes to get around. Like you see that stuff as well.
BSAs and stuff.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just things you see that you don't really see in other war movies from like a film point of view. That like they're hit and run style tactics. sort of shoot and scoot stuff. You don't really see that a lot, and I think this is where the cinematography of this movie really comes into play, because it shows you the vastness of the plains and the dips and the sort of the valleys and everything else that the Israel had, but it's trying to be Afghanistan. But then it echoes that footage that you see from BBC News reports of the time. There's a very famous PBS documentary that was about the Afghans. Obviously, it's a Cold War proxy war. America are fighting a nation without directly fighting them. So they're just doing a lot of things you don't see in war movies, and it's all in the background. If you know it, you know. If you don't, you don't. But it really evokes the look of the period, the look of that war. It's a very there aren't any pitched battles. It's kind of like Vietnam, but different. I really enjoyed how the film does this.
The film does have an authentic feel to it in a lot of ways. A couple of things that I noticed, there's Jezzails, which are very characteristic of that region. They're the long, historically flintlock muskets that are used by Afghan tribesmen. There's a great part in that opening sequence in the village where a chap throws a Molotov into a tank, destroys the tank, and then comes face to face with, I think it's Jason Patric.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And he aims the Jezzail at him, and he fires, but it doesn't go off because there's no flint in his lock. I
think he's fucking with him.
There's all sorts in there. A little bit, yeah. He's badly wounded anyway.
Yeah.
But there's lots of stuff in there that you blink and you miss it. There's a young lad with an Enfield #2 revolver. There's Makarovs, there's TT-33s, there's a Dushka mounted on the Beast, the tank, which is actually a Browning M2 50 caliber.
Yeah, some nice mock-ups.
It's not a bad mock-up, but you can definitely tell that the difference is identifiable. There's one of the Afghan tribesmen has a Israeli file, which
really didn't notice.
Is interesting. And you mentioned earlier the recordless rifle, the B10 up on the hill. I'll talk about that in my favorite scenes because I love that village sequence. It's great.
The only thing they didn't have, and I wish they'd had it, was a sequence where the Mujahideen fighters used a flat surface just to fire rockets off of with no barrels or anything, because that's quite an iconic thing I've seen. I wish they'd done that. That'd have been cool at the end if they'd had, when the RPG breaks, I thought, they're going to line up all the RPG rounds and they're going to fire them without any aiming system like they used to do.
Sure.
That'd have been cool. Because it was a very ad hoc thing, wasn't it? The way they fought.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a classic insurgency, guerrilla warfare, making do with what they had. What else have we not mentioned? The tank itself is really interesting.
The beast.
We've neglected to mention the beast.
We always do it on the show. We pick out some random ass shit and we forget the elephant in the room, which this week is a huge fucking T-55.
Yeah. So the tank's cool because it's got some features that you don't expect. It has a flamethrower mounted, which there were T-55s that had flamethrowers, but not where this one projects it from, but it's a cool scene.
Yeah.
So this one, as we mentioned, was, it belonged to the IDF, and the production bought the film. It had originally been captured during, I think, the 6 Day War, possibly Syrian, and the Israelis had upgraded it to a TI-67 spec, which was a slightly improved version.
I heard it was an Egyptian one. One of them could have been Egyptian.
Yeah. Could have been Egyptian. The only other thing in the film is the mocked up Mi-8.
That's cool.
Which
it's
is
a French Skorsky.
Yeah. It's an Aerospatiale SA 321 Super Ferrelin.
Oh, okay.
Ferrelin.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks good enough. I wouldn't know. I'm no helicopter expert.
Exactly. If you're not a helicopter nerd, then
we had a listener pointed it out immediately,
cool.
and I loved it. I was like, "That's fantastic knowledge, just to get that off the dome. Fantastic." But going back to the tank, there's some good stuff on Warriors Inc. About did you have this about the barrel?
No, go for it, mate.
Okay, cool. listen, going back to that tank, because it is really like, a character in itself. So there's a great bit on Warriors Inc. with Dal Dye talking about how they trained. So they found the remote area of the Sinai Desert, and he was training them in like how to get out of a tank when it's under fire and you need to get out, how you crew it, everything else. He was really going for it. He had a ex-Marine with him as well that they used in the previous movie, and he talks about getting annoyed at how in movies that tanks aren't represented properly, and when rounds are fired, barrels don't move and the tanks don't shake. You can tell it's like a charge. So he wrote how he made the firing in the movie look as accurate as he could. So he says, I finally came up with a mock 90mm cannon round that would make the recoil system of the tank function. We fired a projectile with a quantity of water that equaled the weight of a normal HE round and sealed the round with wax behind a normal primer and a small amount of powder. When the powder detonated, the recoil system sensed the weight and resisted the weight of the water, and the recoil system functioned. All that came out of the muzzle was a spray of water, smoke and steam, but the tank rocked as if it had fired a live round.
It does look good.
It really does.
It does look good.
Yeah, it does. And it's also the way that they film inside is all claustrophobic. These tanks, it looks hella old as well. Like all the dials look like they were made in they genuinely were made like 2 decades prior to the movie being made. But there's just a look to these tanks. Like it's not comfortable inside. It's rough, ready. No. Russian kit is just whenever any Russian kit I've ever owned, like it just feels like it's just knocked up in an afternoon. There's a real sort of ruggedness and realism to the tank that I don't think
it's filthy. Yeah, it's filthy as well throughout the whole thing.
It is filthy. Yeah, they all are, and they go from looking kind of like they've rolled out of a base and they've been in a column for a few hours, perhaps, to being really disheveled, really dirty. I think Kolikov, what's his bloody name? Korvachenko, sorry. I think he has a wash in a stream, or they have a wash at one point, and then they look okay, but then they quickly go back to being very disheveled. I really like that. It's not clean. It's what Fury got right. Fury made these guys dirty. It made them feel lived in. The tank's like a home.
It's just good mise en scène, isn't it?
Very good. Yeah, exactly. The set design and the set dressing is fantastic. Oh, I was going to ask you one thing. Can you fix RPGs with bits of SMLEs?
That's a really interesting scene. So Jason Patric's character takes the RPG, takes off the pistol grip and trigger mech, and has a look inside, and it looks like the lock spring or the lock plate's broken because it doesn't cock. So with an RPG, you manually cock the action. There's a little hammer just behind the pistol grip, like a revolver. You pull it back, that cocks the action, and then when you pull the trigger, that hits the that ignites the rocket, basically. And in that scene, he takes the rear sight from a SMLE. So I don't know. I watched it really closely before we, began recording, and I wanted to see if I could see which part of the rear sight base he'd taken. But it's too dark, and his hands are in the way.
Yeah,
and he does it very quickly, and there's not a lot to a Lee Enfield rear sight.
No, it's just not.
Like a
flips out
tangent. Yeah, and so I'm not entirely sure what he took from it in order to make the lock work again. But he kind of just slips it in without
I know it's a real MacGuffin
alteration to the part.
Proper MacGyver's it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But
perhaps
it's just
fascinating. He just needed like a little shim to get the spring into position or something like that.
Metal. Yeah.
It's a very robust mechanism, so there's reason it couldn't be possibly fixed in the field with something that would work within it.
I like how they are,
but it's really interesting that he did it.
Yeah, and then that's another thing as well. Like they're very powerful. Like they have this aura around them because it's the only thing that these Mujahideen have to fight against the tanks. So they treat them like they're really important. And a guy fires one out of hand while he's trying to look at like sort of a firing mechanism, and he shoots one into a
he's trying to work out how it works.
Into the wall of like a bit of rock face. And the other guys look at him as if to go like, "What are you doing? Like we've only got a few of them. Like we've only got a few of them rounds. Like I love it. I like the way that weapons are treated.
There's some great close-ups of it where you can see the rubber mold, the seam lines on the RPG warhead, the PG-7s.
It's the Red Dawn RPG,
and
isn't it?
I really
like a bit of pipe. Yeah.
Yeah, the RPGs in Red Dawn are a valiant effort, but they're way off the mark. This is perhaps one of the best representations of an RPG being fired because it is an RPG being fired. It's an actual RPG being fired. It just put like a dummy warhead on it.
Yeah.
The only other thing that occurs to me within the sphere of this is the crew are armed with AKMS rather than AK-74s. So they're armed with 7.62 AKs with the folding stocks rather than AKS-74s, which would have been what the Russians used.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think because it's not beyond the realms of possibility, but I think it's just, isn't it? Like it's what they've got. Yeah, I just thought it's what they'd have.
The Soviet-backed Afghan forces all used AKMs and AKSs.
Right. Okay.
So they would have had 7.62 AKs definitely. But Russian forces predominantly had. They probably would have had AKS-74s in the tank crews, I think.
Yeah. It's nice to see. I don't know why it is with the tank film, but any film where someone gets out of a tank with their crew weapon. I love seeing it. I don't know why. It's like a little trope. It's like my own little trope. I'm like, oh, we're going to see a crew weapon. I don't know why that's so cool to me, but it just is. It's just got something about
it. They're doing the thing.
They've got their crew weapons out. It's like in Fury where they like gear up for the attack, and they're all like sorted out their grease guns. I'm like, gonna get some grease gun action.
Well, that leads us nicely into favorite scenes because my favorite scene in this film is actually the opening, I think. There's a lot of great scenes in this film, and it's a strong film in terms of scenes and performances. But that village assault is a great set piece. You get a platoon of tanks, 4 tanks, and it really establishes the ruthlessness of the Soviets. There's that great bit with the recoilless rifle up on the hill, the guy trying to fire down onto the tanks, and he's manning it on his own, so he can't reload quickly, and it's covered in dust and it's dirty and he can't get the action open.
There's a really lot of nice fake details with killing tanks in this movie. It really fakes it out a lot. I like that. We've got a good fake out in a movie where you're like, oh, he's got one. No, he hasn't. Oh no, you're toast now, mate.
Yeah, because it does look like he hit it, doesn't it? And it's just the sand and the dust as it clears, like the and I love how vicious the Soviets are, and they dismount and they have their AKs, as you mentioned, and they're ruthless. They shoot down anyone who pops out of the buildings. They shoot some goats. A guy fires
those poor goats getting a blank fire shot at them.
They shit themselves, don't they?
I was trying to work out how they did the dead goat. I was like, did they pile the goats around like a hump?
Don't goats fall over when they're startled?
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Maybe that's what happened.
Stunt goat.
Yeah, I'm not a goat expert.
That's a stunt.
Fighting on film man. Is not a goat expert.
We're not goat experts.
We're not goat experts. But the guy fires an RPG-7 at like a mosque building.
There's a lot of imagery going on here. Definitely. I'll shock to quite Alan Partridge. Can I shock you? I also like this scene, and it is my favourite scene. Can I shock you? I like the beast.
The guy with the Molotov just comes out of nowhere and throws a Molotov down. And the screams from inside the tank, very visceral.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Jason Patric's trying to get in to like help his crewmates get out, but there's no way, he just can't do it. And then there's that sequence of the Afghan is pulled by the Russians over to the other tank. And
it's a brutal opener. Like it's everything you need to set you up.
They say put him underneath the tracks, and he drags himself underneath the tracks.
Yeah, like an absolute boss. He's going out on his own terms. I love that. There's no relent.
Grizzly.
Don't relent to the invader. I'm going to resist you to the end. I want you to. You're crushing me, but it's my choice. you know?
Yeah, no Russian will leave Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's cold. Everyone's doing exactly what they should do to set you up. And it's a nice set piece.
I think that scene's really good because it's affecting for both us, the viewer, but also you can see the visible effect that it has on Jason Patric's character as well, which obviously plays out in that he eventually, it's too much for him to bear.
Yeah.
Following Daskal's orders.
Although I do, I see, I know what the movie's trying to do. It's trying to make you emotionally attached to one of the Russians, because obviously you couldn't just have it. Well, you might do it now. A brave director might have done it then, where they were all thoroughly unlikable. But I still have a problem in my head. You still drive the tank forward. You could have said no still.
He does.
You still did it.
He does.
And I know you got, you got Tank Boy holding your hair being like, forward. You have no choice. Yeah. But you did have a choice and you still took it. So I still think you're an arsehole at the end of the film. I don't think you're absolved.
That gives the character some complexity and you know, a bit of meat, doesn't it?
But the movie doesn't even absolve him, because he gets dragged out of the country on a helicopter, dejected, because he found some friends and they happen to be the enemy.
Yeah, well, he kind of makes the choice, doesn't he? He decides to go with them. So he takes off like the Afghan jerkin that he's wearing, and he takes the Giselle with him, and then he sort of gets onto the winch of the helicopter, and it's an interesting ending to the film. I think
if he's depressed getting on that helicopter, he'll be depressed when he gets back into bloody Vladivostok or whatever, and the regime's collapsing, and there's no jobs or money.
Wait till you have to explain what happened in the valley to your commissar. That's going to be a fun one for you.
Imagine writing that report, and then some women threw boulders down and crushed all my friends. Jesus.
Nothing else happened.
And they dragged me through a valley, and I almost hit that rock face about 10 times. I constantly shake, pull me up.
I'm spinning uncontrollably. Helicopter. Anyway.
But no, you are right. Getting back on track there. We always got a bit avant-garde. Getting back on track, though,
we really do.
The opener just sets up the tone for the movie. You've got a thoroughly unlikable enemy. You've got, I wouldn't say plucky, but you've got a determined set of rebel fighters that want to take revenge, and they have motive. They're not just out for blood's sake. They have motive. They've seen their village destroyed. Their women have been attacked. Their livelihood, the goats have been killed. Their mosque's been destroyed. Yeah. So it's classic motive. It's cat and mouse all the way through, and it's just this sort of. It's this perfect sort of melange of hatred that just goes throughout the whole movie. The crew are paranoid at the start because they don't know what to expect. They don't care. They don't want to learn about the Afghans. The only character that does gets ostracized. They leave him on a rock to die because he says no. There's so much going on. You almost.
And that's a great scene. That's a great scene.
There's so many. It's just a very good film. I can't really fault it this week. It's one of, and I know we watched it together. And that might have affected my view time, but we were like looking at each other going, wow, this is something. And it really is. So maybe we should just slide into final thoughts like we do. So as I said at the start, it's Douglas Milsom's cinematography that really does make this movie just so thoroughly watchable and enjoyable. Like it just adds so much depth to everything, and nothing's missed. Everything's intentional. Moody, you feel lonely, you feel just as lonely as the men in the tank. You feel like there's no one else in Afghanistan at that time. You're desolate. Even the helicopter coming in and coming out, it shows the vastness of that region. It's perfectly staged, and every frame could be a piece of art, really, this film. It does feel more arty than we have covered it previously. It's in the same vein as Platoon Leader. The script might not be fantastic, but the cinematography and the mise en scène pulls you through it, and it's in my sort of list of war movies you should see. And the score's fantastic as well. Yeah, it's like this synthy 80s type thing that doesn't outstay its welcome. There's more traditional action music when it needs to be, but there's not too much of it. And it just came away from it not feeling for anybody, but in a good way. Like, it made me think a lot more. It was more cerebral watch than can't wait for the next explosion. It's
a more cerebral watch than Rambo.
Yeah, Yeah, more
obviously.
respectful to the overall war and the actual themes of that conflict and how
Yeah,
brutal it was on both sides.
It doesn't caricature the Russians.
No, and it doesn't have a stupid.
It portrays them as brutal, but that is the kind of war that they were fighting.
And it doesn't do that thanks to the brave Mujahideen fighters that Rambo 3 does at the end. That weird sort of
always makes me smile.
It does, yeah. Like, you won't be saying that in 20 years. Fighting the Cold War on film. That's what the Americans did, didn't they? It's just a good movie, isn't it? I can understand why it's cult. As I said, I wrote here, perfectly encapsulates the Russians leaving Afghanistan, battered and broken, just like the tank. The boulders crashing down around the tank at the end is a fantastic metaphor for the end of the Russian invasion and the crumbling regime at home. And I've said it a lot, but that's how it feels to me. Even if it wasn't intended, it's a perfect metaphor for that end of that war, because it really did send a shockwave through to the Kremlin, and it really sort of forms the modern Russia that we have now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. It is beautifully shot. It's well paced. The performances are great. I really like Eric Abari as Samad, and his complex character of being an Afghan who has sided with the Russians, and he's gone to university. I think in Russia it's mentioned, and he's the second in command of the tank. But the prejudice of the tank commander sees him relegated to just menial tasks.
Yeah.
And obviously he doesn't trust him because he murders him in cold blood.
Yeah. Puts like a round of dushka in him, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's doing his afternoon prayers, and then that seems to tip the tank commander, tank boy over the edge, sends him into the river to test the depth because they're going to ford the river, and shoots him. And it's a very striking sequence because you kind of feel it's coming, but you don't know whether he's going to really do it, or whether Jason Patric is going to prevent it from happening again, because that is part of the build-up and the tensions between the tank commander and Jason Patric's character. I think the tank commander performance is excellent. It has that obsessiveness that's almost Captain Ahab-like, where it's almost Moby Dick within Moby Dick, where the Afghans have their own obsession of getting revenge, but at the same time, the tank commander is obsessed with completing his mission, taking retribution against Patrick when he realizes that he's sided with the Afghans. But yeah, it's a very interesting film, and we haven't even mentioned the portrayal of chemical weapons use. With the poisoning of the wells.
Yeah, there's that,
and the impacts that has on not only the Afghans but also the Russians. Dale Dye ends up dying because of
they all drink the water,
drinking tainted water. Yeah,
and then that comes
is
to bite them.
Really interesting nuance.
Because then they can't use the water to replenish the tank, cool the radiator, all that other stuff. It's a real paranoia sort of kind of movie, isn't it? I really do think it sort of just descends into this madness that no one really gets out of, because at the end everyone's affected. Everyone comes away from
the tank commanders there talking about sacrificing themselves to Stephen Baldwin and the other member of the crew when they're inside the tank, and he's
a proper like Stalinite, isn't he? Everything or nothing.
For the motherland, he wants to just blow himself up, hands him out some F1 grenades, and he's like, we're gonna do it. And they're like, no, we're not. And they end up like wrestling it out of his hand.
Yeah, they are mad. Like, we're not doing that. Yeah. It's great.
But yeah,
it's such a good film.
It's a great film, and I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, it would. And we don't really have a leaderboard of movies, but then I do a thing on TikTok, which is war movies to watch before you die, and this is going on the list. I'll make one about it because, we know that the supporting cast don't not ever come up trumps, because they come up trumps every time when they pick a movie. But this is one that I'm really pleased that was picked, because it's just a real treat in the sea of.
And it's one I hadn't seen before as well.
No,
went into it completely fresh.
Yeah, it was on the shelf. My cat chose it, didn't he? Actually, do you remember?
He did, yeah. We what was the other one we held
Red
up for
Dawn.
him? Red Dawn, yeah.
Because they both had Russians in, so we were like, right, we've narrowed it down. We can't pick. We were like, we're like 2 beers in or something.
Rob brought his entire DVD collection down.
I did,
we were like,
yeah.
oh, yeah.
About 100 DVDs.
Cat's going to have to pick because we can't pick. So Baz picked for us.
The Beast, the miniature Beast, chose the big Beast film.
Barry came through for us.
Barry came through. There we go. FOF mascot, Barry the cat. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was The Beast, 1988. If you can find a copy online, please purchase it. It's going to be a great addition to your collection, or just rent it online and enjoy it. And thanks to the patrons yet again. If you, as we said at the start of the show, if you want to support us on Patreon, keep the lights on, keep the mics working here at FOF HQ, that'd be much appreciated. But obviously, we just appreciate any listen, any review that you can give us. Really helps the show. And don't forget, next week we have a huge show coming up for you. If you're listening now, if you're listening in the future, you can go and listen to it now. But if you're listening in real time, next week we drop our Dam Busters anniversary special. So it's 80 years since Operation Chastise with 617 Squadron blew up those dams on the Ruhr. And we have 2 fabulous guests to join us to talk about that cinematic masterpiece. We have Al Murray and James Holland from the We Have Ways podcast joining us specially. So please look out for that one when it drops.
It's going to be fabulous.
It's going to be great. So look out for that one, and we'll catch you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.